August 1814. Washington, D.C. was burning. British troops had marched into the American capital and set fire to some of the most important buildings in the young United States. The White House was burning. The Capitol was burning. And for a moment, it seemed as if Britain might actually break America. But the British had one more target: Baltimore, a major American port. And if Baltimore fell, the young nation could be pushed to the brink. But standing between the British fleet and the city was an old American fort, Fort McHenry, a fortress that looked far less impressive than the mighty British Navy approaching it. And yet, that battered fort was about to change American history forever.
In 1812, the young republic faced its greatest test. British ships choked the coast as American troops stood firm.
The year was 1814. The United States had been fighting Britain for 2 years in the War of 1812. The war had already been brutal. American forces had struggled on multiple fronts. And then something changed. Napoleon Bonaparte was defeated in Europe. Britain no longer needed to concentrate nearly all of its military power against France. Now, Britain could send experienced troops and ships across the Atlantic, and America was suddenly facing a much more dangerous enemy. The British began striking American targets along the Chesapeake Bay. Then came the attack that shocked the nation. Washington fell. On August 24, 1814, British troops entered the American capital. Government buildings were burned. The American government was forced to flee. The message was terrifying. If Washington could fall, perhaps Baltimore could fall too. Baltimore was not just another American city. It was a major commercial port. Its privateers had inflicted serious losses on British merchant shipping, and Britain wanted to punish the city. But Baltimore was ready. Thousands of Americans mobilized. Defensive lines were built around the city, and at the entrance to Baltimore Harbor stood Fort McHenry. The fort had been designed to control access to the harbor. If the British fleet wanted to sail directly into Baltimore, Fort McHenry stood in the way. The British plan was simple: destroy the fort, enter the harbor, support the army, and force Baltimore to surrender. But there was one problem. The fort refused to cooperate.
Load cartridge! Ram ball! Run out!
Fort McHenry was not some gigantic European fortress. It was an American coastal defense built years earlier, and parts of the fort and its wooden structures were hardly luxurious, but what it lacked in elegance, it made up for with position, artillery, and determined defenders. Commanding the fort was Major George Armistead. He knew what was coming. The British fleet was approaching, and Armistead wanted the British to understand exactly what they were attacking. So an enormous American flag was prepared, a flag so large that the British would be able to see it from far away. But the real test was still ahead.
Prepare to drop anchor!
September 13th, 1814. The British fleet took position outside Baltimore Harbor. British ships carried powerful mortars and Congreve rockets. Then, the bombardment began. Shells exploded over the fort. Rockets streaked through the night sky. The ground shook. The defenders were surrounded by noise, smoke, fire, and darkness. For hours, the British continued firing. Hundreds of projectiles were launched toward the fort. From a distance, it looked impossible for the old fort to survive. But the Americans held their positions, and the British ships had a problem. They could bombard the fort, but they could not easily get close enough to destroy it. Fort McHenry's position protected the entrance to the harbor. The British fleet remained outside effective American cannon range, while its own heavy weapons hammered the fort from a distance. It became a battle of endurance. Imagine standing inside Fort McHenry that night. You hear explosions. You see flashes of fire. The walls shake beneath your feet. You don't know whether the next shell will hit your position. And somewhere in the darkness, British ships are waiting. One shell even landed near the fort's powder magazine. If the magazine had exploded, the consequences could have been catastrophic. But the fort survived. The bombardment continued for roughly 25 hours. And still, the American flag remained.
I will never surrender this ship! Strike your colors now!
There was another witness to the battle. His name was Francis Scott Key. Key was a lawyer from Georgetown. He had gone aboard a British vessel to negotiate the release of an American prisoner. His mission succeeded, but the British would not allow him to leave immediately. Why? Because the British were preparing to attack Baltimore. So Key remained aboard a ship, watching the battle from the water. All night. He watched the rockets. He watched the explosions. He waited for one question to be answered. Had Fort McHenry fallen? Then, the guns became silent. The night was ending. The first light of dawn appeared over Baltimore. Key looked toward the fort, and there, above the battered defenses, was the American flag, still flying. The fort had survived. The British had failed to capture it, and without control of the harbor, their invasion plan had collapsed. The British land forces had also been unable to take Baltimore. Their commanding general, Robert Ross, had been killed during the fighting near North Point. The British had no clear path into the city, so they withdrew. Francis Scott Key saw that flag and began writing. His poem became known as the Star-Spangled Banner. More than a century later, in 1931, it would become the national anthem of the United States. Think about what had happened. Britain had burned Washington. Its army had marched deep into American territory. Its navy had surrounded Baltimore. And yet, an American fort had refused to surrender. Fort McHenry did not win the War of 1812 by itself, and it certainly wasn't the only reason Britain eventually failed to achieve its objectives in America. But on one crucial night, this old coastal fort became the barrier that Britain could not break. Its walls held, its defenders held, and its flag remained standing. The British invasion of Baltimore was over, and from that failed attack came something much bigger than a military victory. A symbol, a poem, and eventually, a national anthem, all because, on one September night in 1814, an old fort refused to fall. This is the story of how Fort McHenry helped stop Britain's attack on Baltimore, and how one night of war created one of America's most enduring symbols